ABC News. This week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts.
Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done.
The battle is joined. Now preparations are underway to root out and destroy terrorism.
As the United States musters its allies, we'll speak with Secretary of State Colin Powell, the man spearheading the international campaign, and key Arab leader Jordan's King Abdullah.
Plus, how will our military fight this new kind of war?
That's This Week, featuring George Will. Now from Washington, Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts. And from New York, George Stephanopoulos.
Welcome to our program. First, a little news. The announcement that violinist Isaac Stern died yesterday in New York. Not only was Stern one of the nation's foremost musicians, he's also credited with revitalizing Carnegie Hall. He was 81. And Pope John Paul II celebrated Mass in Kazakhstan today. He used the occasion to call on Christians and Muslims to work together, saying religion must never be used as a reason for conflict. The Pope will be in Asia until Thursday. And now for the latest, we go to our ABC correspondent, starting with Terry Moran at the White House. Terry?
Thanks, Cokie. The president is at Camp David once again today, taking action on a variety of fronts, symbolic and concrete, as he continues to lead the country into what he calls this new kind of war. Symbols. None has been more powerful or ubiquitous over the past 12 days than the flag. And in accordance with the proclamation he signed after the attacks, which fixed last night at sundown as the end of the period when the flag should be flown at half-staff, today the president raises the flag at Camp David in a military ceremony back to full staff. In concrete steps, late last night, the president signed the airline relief package. He also lifted sanctions on India and Pakistan, and behind the scenes has asked all the agencies involved to come up with a white paper compiling all the information that has been assembled over the last few years linking Osama bin Laden to terrorist activities. While ABC News is told that this remains a top secret document, we're also told that it could be used to justify to the world U.S. military action in Central Asia. And for more on the military buildup, here's John McWethy at the Pentagon.
Thanks, Terry. Here at the Pentagon, we're beginning to see the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. The Russian news agency Interfax is reporting that 2 C-130 transport planes have landed in Uzbekistan. This is a country that is on the northern border with Afghanistan. Several hundred troops got off, they say. Sources here in the Pentagon are confirming that, yes, American forces are on the ground in Uzbekistan, and they say that is not the only place, but they're not providing details. We are also seeing B-52 bombers over the last 24 hours taking off for the region. We expect that there will be B-1 bombers beginning their journey to the region later today. There is 5,000 more reservists have been called up. This now stands at about 10,000. These are all for domestic issues. First troops to go overseas on a reserve call-up have not been named yet. We continue to have deployment orders. Another one has been signed. This is the second one. It's providing some additional security for the B-52 and B-1 bombers and other forces that have already gone overseas. The timing of all of this, we are told by sources here in the Pentagon that the important pieces of the air campaign will be in place by the mid-week deadline that the Secretary of Defense has set for our forces. They hesitate, they immediately say that does not mean that the U.S. is going to do anything by midweek, but the pieces will be in place. Now for more on what is going on in the region, my colleague Bob Woodruff in Pakistan.
John, there has apparently been some fighting in northern Afghanistan today. The Northern Alliance, which is the Afghan militia that has been fighting a civil war against the Taliban for years, claims they have now taken several key villages in northern Afghanistan and killed up to 80 Taliban soldiers. Now, the Taliban tells us officially they have not had any information about this at all, and with no independent journalists on the ground in that area, it is not possible at this time to confirm it. The other big news out of Pakistan today, as Terry mentioned, is that the U.S. has lifted nuclear-related sanctions against both Pakistan and India. These were the sanctions that were imposed in 1998 after the successful testing of nuclear weapons by both those countries. The lifting of sanctions against Pakistan is widely seen as a reward for them cooperating with the U.S., and that it could go a long way to helping the government here sell that cooperation to its own people. It could bring in billions of dollars in new aid, both from the U.S. and from international organizations such as the IMF. There have been several protests on the streets of Pakistan over the last couple of days. Another one this morning in Peshawar, the Pakistan city along the Afghan border. Most of these protests are viewed as relatively small, mostly radical religious parties, and not all that significant. But there is a fear here that if there are significant civilian casualties in any attack on Afghanistan, many, many more people, perhaps more than 1 million, could come out on the streets. Koki?
Thanks to Bob Woodruff in Pakistan. And now for what's going on in New York, we go to George Stephanopoulos.
Thanks, Koki. Here in New York this afternoon, 60,000 will gather under tight security at Yankee Stadium to remember the dead and missing with a ceremony called A Prayer for America. The service will be hosted by Oprah Winfrey and James Earl Jones. But Mayor Rudy Giuliani says after the prayers, New Yorkers can best honor the victims and fight the terrorists by embracing normal life.
You know, all these people come up and they ask, how can we help? How can we help? What can we do? There are people with expertise that can do particular things, but the most important things people can do right now is go back to their way of life, the way they would lead it, show we're unafraid, show we're just going to move ahead with, you know, the kind of life we have in America. I think that would send the best signal of all.
But why is that so important? For a lot of people, they might think we still need time to grieve.
We can do both. We can do both. We can grieve and we can cry and we can mourn, and we're going to do that forever. The enormity of this attack and tragedy is going to, live forever in American history and live in our hearts. But now it's important for us, those of us who have survived, to honor the memory of those who have died by going forward and leading our life. Make sure America goes forward. This is what these terrorist cowards were trying to stop. We shouldn't let them succeed.
At Ground Zero, recovery continues with close to 100,000 tons of debris removed so far. And now for the latest on the investigation, here's ABC's chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross. Good morning, Brian.
Morning, George. Yesterday came and went without incident, to the great relief of investigators who had made a calculated decision to issue a general warning that there could be more terror strikes this weekend. FBI agents continue to search for as many as 24 suspects with known ties to the dead hijackers, who also have received flight training. There continues to be concern, however. Crop dusters are banned in 30 major urban areas, and there are warnings out to the petrochemical and nuclear industries to be on a heightened state of alert. Meantime, overseas, a series of arrests in London, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France may have thwarted at least 2 different attacks on U.S. interests there, including the American embassy in Paris. Authorities in those countries are now working very closely with American authorities, something that wasn't always the case, George, before last week's attacks.
Thanks, Brian. That's it from New York, Sam. Back to Washington.
Thank you, George. There are many issues and questions in the minds of all of us now about the new war on terrorism. Within the hour, we talked to Secretary of State Colin Powell about some of them. Secretary Powell, thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. The Japanese news agency, quoting Japanese government sources, says the United States has warned of possible new attacks this coming week. What can you tell us about that?
I'm not familiar with that particular report, but I think we have to be vigilant during this time of heightened tension, and you can be sure the United States government is doing everything it can to discern whether there are any threats coming our way. And this is a time for a little bit of heightened additional security, but at the same time, we have to start getting back to normal life in America.
So here in the United States, what's your message? Heightened vigilance, but...
Heightened vigilance. We will increase security at airports. We will watch our borders more carefully. We will follow up on all the leads we have been given. But at the same time, we need to get back to work. We need to get back to ball games. We need to show the world that America is strong. We can come through this, and we're not going to be hiding under tables.
Over the weekend, the Taliban leadership in Afghanistan claimed to have downed an airplane of some sort. What sort?
Well, I would rather not talk about what might or might not have been downed. We're going to be very careful during this period not to blabber too much about what might or might not happen with respect to military activities or other kinds of activities.
Mr. Secretary, there's also reports from that area that in Uzbekistan, U.S. planes have landed and with the U.S. personnel. Can you talk about that?
Not to my knowledge, but of course we do have repositioning of forces taking place. And we have been satisfied with the cooperation that we have received from the nations that have to provide overflight and other sorts of access requirements. And so we're moving right along, but we're not going to go into the specific details of individual countries.
Well, you say satisfied, but there are widespread reports also this weekend that Saudi Arabia has yet to grant permission for the use of an important base there for the command and control and perhaps staging for U.S. forces.
There was a report in the newspaper yesterday that suggested I had placed some requirement on the Saudis that they had not responded to. That's not correct. We have been in touch with the Saudis on a daily basis. They have been very supportive, and they have been providing everything we have asked of them so far.
Well, you said not responded to, but have they responded fully in the way we want them to?
They have responded to all the requests we have asked them to respond to, and I'm sure there'll be more requests coming in the future, but I can assure you that the Saudi government, the Saudi leadership, and their representative here in the United States has been responsive to all the requests we have placed on them. They are a friend in this. They have condemned this attack, and they have offered support in many ways. And we are satisfied with the level of their support and their commitment to this campaign.
Well, I'm sorry to prolong this, but one more question, because the story that I read suggested that if the Saudis did not allow us to do all the things we wanted to do, it could delay an operation against Osama bin Laden for months.
I've read that story, and it's not an accurate story. I did not place that kind of a demand on the Saudi leadership because nobody asked me to. There was no requirement to. We have personnel in Saudi Arabia, military and civilian personnel and diplomatic personnel who are in close touch with the Saudi leadership. And we are working through all the issues and all the things that our side would like to see done, and we're working through with the Saudis on a very, very satisfactory basis.
All right. The sanctions have been listed against Pakistan, and I suppose to be even-handed against India, that were placed on these two nations at the time we were concerned about their nuclear development. Is lifting the sanctions something that in the long run may come back to haunt us?
I don't think so. We had been examining the lifting of those sanctions, not all sanctions, just the sanctions that were put in place against India and Pakistan as a result of their nuclear experimentation a couple of years ago. And so, frankly, I had made the judgment to recommend to the president some weeks ago that some of these sanctions be lifted, not all of them, or other sanctions that are still in place. And we consulted with Congress over the past several days. Congress was fully supportive, and in fact, there were even some suggestions from members of Congress that we lift even more of the sanctions that are in place. But the president made a decision yesterday to lift those specific sanctions that were related to the nuclear test. I don't think it'll come back to haunt us. I think we have made it clear to both of these countries that we don't want to see a nuclear escalation any further in the region, and I think they both have been acting rather responsibly, especially in this present instance.
So we are now getting total cooperation from Pakistan.
We are getting cooperation from Pakistan in a very, very substantial way. President Musharraf took a risk in joining this campaign, and he understood that it was an important campaign to be a part of. And so we're very pleased with the support that we are receiving from Pakistan.
We don't use the word crusade again.
I don't. Campaign.
What is victory against Osama bin Laden?
Victory in this campaign against terrorism ultimately is for all of our societies to be safer, to feel that they don't have the same kind of threat from terrorists that may have existed in the past. And so we hope to bring Osama bin Laden to justice, or bring justice to him, as the president has indicated.
Does it matter?
And not just him, but his whole network, Al-QAEDA, which exists not only in Afghanistan, but in countries all around the world. And we have to pull it up. And we're doing that. The campaign has begun. It's begun with the kind of coalitions we have pulled together with the United Nations, with NATO, with the European Union, with some 40 different organizations coming into it. The campaign has begun because we have gone after financial transactions. We are being more vigilant on our borders. We are doing everything we can to find out where they are and drying up their sources of support and their havens. So this campaign has already begun.
Does it matter which? Would we prefer, in the first instance, to attempt to bring him to justice, and if that is not possible, then to bring justice to him, and we know what we're talking about?
What we want to do is to make sure that his activities are stopped and that he is stopped. He is under indictment, one way or the other. I think the way that we had suggested to the Taliban was that they turn him over to justice, to authorities who could administer justice.
All right, let me show you something you said the other day and just see whether you have changed your view on it concerning proof. You said, we are assembling the evidence that will tell us in a way that the world will fully confer with us concur with us, who is responsible for this? Are we going to present before the world evidence of Osama bin Laden's guilt?
Yes, and I think his guilt is going to be very obvious to the world. I mean, he has been indicted previously for terror activity against the United States. And so this is a continuing pattern of terrorism, and we are putting all of the information that we have together, the intelligence information, the information being generated by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, and I think we will put before the world, the American people, a persuasive case that there will be no doubt when that case is presented that it is Al-QAEDA led by Osama bin Laden who has been responsible for this terrible, tragic incident.
So you're talking about something beyond simple assertions by U.S. leaders. You're talking about assertions backed up by the evidence.
Yes.
Okay. Are we intending to remove the Taliban leadership? That is, physically remove them from power in Afghanistan?
We are interested in getting the Al-QAEDA network led by Osama bin Laden. They are very intertwined with the Taliban leadership. We hope the Taliban leadership regime comes to its senses and decides that it is not worth the game to keep him in their country, and they remove him or send him out of the country where he can be brought to justice. With respect to the nature of the regime in Afghanistan, that is not uppermost in our minds right now. It wasn't 15 days ago, and it isn't right now, except to the extent that the Taliban regime continues to support Osama bin Laden.
Not uppermost in our minds, meaning that it's a back burner issue, or meaning perhaps it'll go away?
We don't know yet. We'll have to see how the Taliban regime decides to deal with this issue as we continue down the road of this campaign. But right now, I'm not going to say that it has become one of the objectives of the United States government to either remove or put in place a different regime, but this regime clearly is a regime that has not done much for its people. It's repressing its people in incredible ways, unthinkable ways, but at the same time we have to keep our focus on the Al-QAEDA network, terrorism across the board, where it exists throughout the world, and especially the head of the Al-QAEDA organization, Osama bin Laden.
Okay, terrorism exists throughout the world. President Bush spoke to that, of course, in his address to the Congress of the American people. Here are some of the words that he used. Our war on terror will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. Mr. Secretary, the State Department has 31 organizations as foreign terrorist organizations on its list. How many of these have global reach?
Quite a few of them, and quite a few of them will go after our interest in the regions that they're located in and right here at home. And so we have to treat all of them as potentially having the capacity to affect us in a global way, or to affect our friends and our interest in other parts of the world. For example, we have designated 3 groups in Colombia alone as being terrorist organizations, and we are working with the Colombian government to protect their democracy against the threat provided or presented by these terrorist organizations.
Do any of the organizations with whom Yasser Arafat is connected have global reach?
I would say that there are organizations in the Middle East. Some have a link to Mr. Arafat, some do not, but there are organizations in the Middle East that do have some global reach.
Then could he potentially be a target?
At the moment, he is not a target. At the moment, we are working hard to see if we can get Mr. Arafat and Mr. Perez to have a meeting in the very near future, Mr. Perez, the Foreign Minister of Israel, so that we can get started on the Mitchell peace plan.
As you know, the meeting scheduled for today has been called off by Israel because of 2 mortar barrages. Fortunately, no one was hit, but Prime Minister Sharon said we're not going to do it until at least 48 hours pass with no attacks. Is that reasonable?
I spoke to Mr. Sharon this morning, and he reaffirmed to me that he is committed to the process. He is committed to having a meeting. He is committed to finding a way to move forward into the Mitchell peace plan. But he also made it absolutely clear that he needs more quiet, a lower level of violence before he is able to allow Mr. Perez to have that meeting. But I still have hopes that the meeting will take place in the near future, and I'm encouraging both sides, and I'm encouraging Mr. Arafat, who I spoke to yesterday, to do everything in their power to get the violence down.
Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Defense Secretary, and Jesse Helms, the influential Republican on Capitol Hill in Foreign Affairs, both agree Iraq, Saddam Hussein, should be struck. Do you agree?
The president has examined all the options available to him, and he has decided to focus on the campaign which he described to the American people on Thursday evening, which is to go after the Al-QAEDA network, to go after the head of it, Osama bin Laden, and to mobilize an international community for that purpose. And I think he has been enormously successful in pulling that coalition together and giving us a singular focus for the moment. He has not ruled out what we might do in later phases, and all of that remains as options to him. But right now we're focusing on what he said we were focusing on Thursday night.
Is this global campaign something called Operation Noble Eagle?
The name, I don't know that name.
London
lots of
newspaper
names come along.
Well, if Iraq is not to be hit now, and you're holding out the possibility that down the road it might, the president also used the phrase, I think you've used the phrase, that continue to support terrorism. So that's an out for countries as well as organizations, isn't it?
Not intended as an out. It's intended as a signal that the whole world has now unified against terrorism in all of its many, many forms. And for those nations who thought that there was some political benefit from supporting terrorist organizations, the message that the president gave them the other evening is, if you continue to do that, in light of what happened on the 11th of September, in light of the fact that the whole world is coming together now, you have to be prepared to suffer some consequences. They could be economic consequences, they could be other kinds of consequences, but it's time to stand up and be counted. If you want to be part of a civilized world that is moving forward, these are not the sort of activities you should be participating in, supporting, or the kinds of organizations you should be providing a haven to.
You're a general, but you don't sound very warlike compared to other voices in this town and some within the administration.
The only voice that I try to compare myself to and to be consistent with is the President of the United States. All of his cabinet level security advisors are in agreement with the policy direction he has given us, with the instructions he has given us, and the decisions he has made. Mr. Cheney, Secretary Rumsfeld, myself, Dr. Rice, the Secretary of the Treasury, the FBI, the Attorney General, all working together, understand the instructions the President has given us.
We're just about out of time, but you remember the guns versus butter argument in the Vietnam War. Can we, in fact, sustain a national effort with the American people sustaining this effort in the war against terrorism over a protracted time and still back to routine, almost normal, the President said the other night?
I think we can. I think we're strong people. I think that we are people that know we have to get on with life and not walk around in a state of fear. I think we can have confidence in our security officials, police officials, our intelligence organizations, which do a good job. They can't find everything that's about to happen or is going to happen, but our intelligence organizations, the CIA and others, do a very good job. And we just have to get moving forward. We have to get our economy up again. We have to start doing those things which make life normal in America. Let's remember what we're made of. We're made of strong stuff. We have a backbone of steel. We can get through this, and we will get through this, and we'll get through it in the kind of patriotic, proud way that you have seen demonstrated over the last week and a half.
Secretary Powell, thanks very much. Come again, won't you?
Thank you.
Secretary of State Colin Powell. Still ahead, the challenges facing America's military as it embarks on a new kind of war footing. Plus, Jordan's King Abdullah. And when we come back, the economic consequences facing the country. Stay with us.
Green button.
What options does the military have? Here to talk about that is retired General Richard Hawley, former commander of the U.S. Air Combat Command, now a consultant for ABC News. Thanks for being here, General Hawley.
Great to be here, Cokie.
We heard the reports from John McWethy of B-52s, B-1s flying to Uzbekistan. But this war is not going to be in the air, is it? It's going to be special forces on the ground fighting at night?
Well, I think this is going to be a multifaceted campaign. It's, in fact, the military may not be the biggest part of it. But what is happening now is the military is providing options to the president. Getting forces in position, air power, naval power. I'm sure there's some special forces involved here someplace that we haven't seen. But all facets of our military forces will be engaged in this in one way or another. complemented by all the wonderful diplomatic work that's gone on, the creation of this coalition, isolating the Taliban and Osama bin Laden. So,
well, isolating Osama bin Laden, if we send in special forces into Afghanistan and try to get him, are we opening ourselves up for some difficulty? Our history here hasn't been great. Noriega turned into something humiliating, going after Aidid in Somalia didn't work. This could be bad.
these are very difficult operations, but I can't think of any military better prepared to do it than ours. We've got some tremendous advantages.
But they've failed in the past in these kinds of operations.
Well, this is not the military that we had in the past. This is an all-volunteer force, very well-trained, highly motivated, and our ability to integrate the various elements of combat power, troops on the ground, supported by air operations, wonderful intelligence, the emergence of better and more sophisticated ways to find and identify the enemy, all will work to our advantage. And with the right leadership, with a united country behind the military, they will do good work. They won't do it fast. This is going to be a tough, long grind, but they'll do a good job for us.
You talk about the leadership, and of course, in the last war, the leadership was under General Powell, and he formulated the famous Powell doctrine of an identified enemy. You go in with overwhelming military might, you have an objective, and you get out. None of that is the case in this situation.
This is a different kind of fight, different kind of enemy, and I guess it depends on your definition of overwhelming might. Certainly, we're going to overwhelm them, but we're going to overwhelm them in a way that's very different from anything we've been involved in the past. This is not a clash of armies. It's not a clash of air forces or Navy forces. This is a clash in the shadows, and we will use every means at our disposal, and we have a lot of means at our disposal. It will be important that they be well coordinated, that all the facets of this effort, diplomatic, financial, economic, and the military elements work together in a coordinated way, and most importantly, that within the military element, they work together better and in a more coordinated way than ever before.
We're out of time, but just quickly, is the first action going to be an airstrike?
I would not be surprised if that isn't the first action.
Okay, thank you very much, General Hawley. Of course, the other front that is under attack is the economic front. And ABC's Betsy Stark joins us in New York after a week when the Dow fell 14%, the NASDAQ fell 16%. Betsy, what's happening? Are people saying recession is here?
Koki, that's a significant change that occurred this past week. The conversation went from will there be a recession to how long and severe will the recession be. We've really got to think now about how much of a hunker-down mentality is going to take hold and what the impact will be on the economy. There were signs that consumers were back in stores, but are they going to put big spending decisions on hold, like cars and houses? The housing market has been such a strength for the economy, even as it weakened overall. Similarly, what are businesses going to do? There is starting to be some evidence that they're going to put big commitments of capital on hold as we try to work through the uncertainty ahead. Business confidence, consumer confidence are absolutely key to what happens in the economy, and there's been a blow to them.
Well, among the blows, is there any good news? Is there any sign that anybody is picking up economic activity?
Well, it's going to be hard for investors to see an upside after the week we had on Wall Street. But I did talk to some market veterans last week who said, you know, when you start to see the waves of selling that we saw, when you start to see investors dump even the biggest companies with the best prospects, that says to them, perhaps a bottom is near. The market is a forward-looking beast, Koki. It tends to look out 6 to 8 months. And if you have that kind of time horizon and you're optimistic that the medicine is in place for the economy to turn around, maybe we start to see some rally in the stock market, but people are going to have to stomach an awful lot of grim economic and corporate news along the way.
Thanks very much, Betsy Stark in New York. Still ahead, Jordan's King Abdullah, a crucial ally in the Arab world. We'll find out what he thinks of America's new global campaign, plus the roundtable after this. Stay with us.
Prime Minister Tony Blair to the White House.
On the diplomatic front, support from moderate Arab states and the rest of the Muslim world will be crucial to the success of the coalition. For more on that, we're now joined by King Abdullah II of Jordan, who joins us from Amman. Thank you for being with us, Your Majesty.
Thank you, George. Nice to speak to you again.
Your Majesty, we heard this morning that American B-52 and B-1 bombers are now heading towards the region, towards Afghanistan. Are you confident that the coalition can hold together if the United States bombs Afghanistan?
I believe so. Obviously, the Americans are still formulating their objectives, and as the international community, we're waiting to see what those objectives are. But I think you've got the commitment from everybody in the world to be able to really see this through to the end. And we realize that the start is always going to be difficult. The first step is always going to be a burden. But I believe that the steps undertaken by the American Armed Forces will have the full support of the international community.
Your Majesty, the President said in his speech Thursday night that the target was every terrorist group of global reach. And we just heard Secretary of State Powell say there are groups in the Middle East with global reach. Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad have all been involved in terrorist actions in the past. Should they be targets of this coalition?
Well, I think as we've been talking over the past several days, the world has changed dramatically since the 11th of September. And as a result, I think that the new call is to everybody in the international community, as the Americans have been saying, are you with us or are you against us? What's happened in the past is in the past. But today we expect everybody in the international community to decide where they're going to stand. No sitting on the fence is going to be accepted by anybody. And if you've been supporting terrorist activities in the past, it's high time that you make up your mind whether you're going to continue or stop. And if you're going to continue, then you're going to have to face whatever the international community decides is going to be your fate.
So you could stay in the coalition if those groups are targets?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Jordan could stay in the coalition if those groups are targets.
Again, you know, you have to understand that the Americans are formulating a set of objectives that we're not yet privy to. And I think that you have to understand that, as I said, I think the international community is going to say to terrorist organizations or countries that harbor terrorism, it's your turn to make up your mind which way you're going to go. Now, Jordan is fully committed to supporting the United States and the international community in whatever is asked of Jordan, and we will continue to do so. I don't think that Jordan, in our leadership role over the many years, will make a commitment and then back out.
Jordanian intelligence helped uncover a plot to attack Americans during the Millennium celebration. Did you have any advance warning at all of this attack?
No, sir. The funny thing about this particular incident, I think all the international intelligence agency had no prior warning, and none of us picked anything up on the radar. Obviously, if anybody had, I'm sure that they would have provided the information to the United States right away. It took everybody by surprise, and I believe that they must have really put this together using methods that obviously made it very difficult to detect.
Many in the Arab world have said they need to see more evidence before they'll be convinced that bin Laden was behind this attack. Have you seen the evidence, and are you satisfied that he was behind it?
I believe, as Secretary Powell had mentioned, that Osama bin Laden has been responsible for acts of terror all over the world, in Jordan in particular, as well as in North America. The information that most of the intelligence agencies that we talk to lead more and more that if not Osama bin Laden, his organization has a hand and is responsible for what happened in the United States.
Your Majesty, you've said we have to be careful to punish only the real perpetrators and do it in a way that brings justice, not revenge. How can the West and how can this coalition defeat Al-QAEDA without antagonizing the rest of the Muslim world?
Well, again, I think we have to be very, very careful in making the points that this is not a conflict between East and West or between Muslims and Christians. We are dealing with international terrorism, and as was mentioned earlier on the show, there are groups all over the world. I believe that we need to be able to work together on many fronts. The military, I think, is going to be a very small component. I think people in the United States that are expecting a drawn-out military campaign, I don't think that's going to happen. I think there will be certain bursts of military activities around the world. More importantly is the diplomatic political angle, as we just mentioned. In other words, those that harbor terrorism, those that support terrorism, and those terrorist organizations better change the way that they do business. And even more importantly, then is the economic side of it. the funding to terrorist organizations all over the world, and this is where they succeed. Most innocent people think that they're giving away to a cause that goes to the needy, and the money is unfortunately refunneled to support terrorist activities. So I think as we work through a series of actions to be able to put a stop to international terrorism, if you do it smartly, I don't think that you will get a negative reaction anywhere in the world.
Your Majesty, thank you very much, and safe travels to the United States this week.
Yes, sir, and we look forward to seeing you back in Jordan in the near future, I hope.
Thank you very much. When we come back, the roundtable. Stay with us.
President Bush has warned Americans that this war against terrorism may require some sacrifice and will be protracted. George Will, are we up to it?
Well, Sam, a true story. In September 1942, 10 months after Pearl Harbor, General Leslie Groves acquired for the United States 59,000 acres, that's 92 square miles, of semi-wilderness along the Clinch River in eastern Tennessee. Nothing there. Quickly, that changed. Soon there were 55 miles of railroads, 300 miles of paved roads and streets, the town of Oak Ridge. And the town existed for enormous scientific facilities that were soon built there to handle uranium, that is, to separate U-235 from U-238. Well, just 39 months after the wilderness was transformed, there was an explosion in the New Mexico desert, and the atomic age had begun. I mention this story, Sam, because one of the purposes of terrorism is to give people a sense of helplessness. And there always are American voices, unfortunately, who are eager to tell us what America cannot do. Oak Ridge is a story of what America can do when aroused.
Well, George, let's talk about that on our roundtable now. And of course, as we always say, these are our opinions, and you can take them for whatever you think they're worth. George Stephanopoulos, you've just heard George Will make a powerful case of what America can do when aroused. And yet Ho Chi Minh, the late leader of North Vietnam then, said Americans are short of breath. And some believe that that's what happened in the Vietnam War.
Well, I don't think Americans are short of breath right now, and I think as we've seen in the reaction so far to the president's speech, they will be patient, and they are willing to make some sacrifices in order to prosecute this war. But I think we have to think hard about how we think about this war, and I would think actually it's much more effective and right to think about it as an extensive and long-term police action rather than a war. We're fighting criminals, not nations, murderers, not a group of people who are looking to overthrow our country, and I think we have to be careful about how we prosecute the war.
Well, and then how our support for it then lasts, because it isn't such an obvious thing. George made the point, though, that terrorists are trying to take away our sense of hope, and I think that America is much more aroused, obviously, than it was in Vietnam or than it was in the Persian Gulf or even in Korea. Because of this direct attack on this country. And what's worrisome right now, and what makes it hard to get past this right now, is the reports that there could be more actions. And the reports every day that, maybe today is another bad day, or maybe, something, biological and chemical weapons. Everybody keeps talking about, from the Attorney General to the chairman of the intelligence committees on down. And so it becomes very hard to muster the spirit when you're feeling that you're still under attack.
George Will, did the president strike the right note as far as you're concerned?
I think he did, and I think he struck a note that somewhat differs with what George Stephanopoulos said. George says we're not fighting nations. That's true in the sense that we're not fighting populations and whole economies. We are, however, fighting regimes. If we were to capture bin Laden and all his associates today, the terrorism threat would be very serious tomorrow, because they cannot have what the president calls a global reach without the support of states.
It would still be serious, but it would be seriously diminished, George. And it seems like, at least within the administration, despite the expansive rhetoric of the president Thursday night, cooler heads have prevailed, and they have taken off immediate action against Iraq, against other large targets, unless there is more evidence in the future of support for terrorism. And this is essential, at least right now, to avoid antagonizing, to avoid radicalizing the entire Muslim world. If you do that, that if you continue to broaden the reach of this war, you're guaranteed to create more enemies.
Well, we have abundant enemies already. And what the president did say was those who continue to support terrorism will be considered hostile regimes. That means when you go to Syria and say, roll up those terrorist groups and get them out of Damascus, and they don't do it, then you must act against Syria, or the cooler heads
But you know, there are lots
just
of
chilled.
terrorist regimes around the world that have global reach. I mean, I assume that what we're talking about here are ones that are directly involved in this action, because if you start going after every terrorist organization around the world with global reach, this is going to be quite a war indeed.
But collapse one regime. Then you're not going after the needles in the haystack, you're going after the haystack. Collapse one regime and the other regimes will get the picture.
Koki, what did you make of the fact that the Attorney General has put forward some very strong things that he says need to be done now, including deporting immigrants with less than the kind of safeguards that they used to have? Will Congress go along with that?
I think that speaking of deep breaths, Congress has taken a very deep breath when it comes to the counterterrorism legislation, and it's interesting because across the political spectrum, you have seen people from the far left to the far right say that don't do this, don't go after civil liberties in the name of counterterrorism. I do think that that you will see immigrants detained if they think it's necessary to detain them for questioning purposes, that kind of thing. But I think there's a real movement against going after American citizens' individual rights.
What do you think, George Will?
I don't think our civil liberties are in serious danger. I see nothing that's being talked about that threatens them. Inconveniences, yes, but no basic liberties.
George Stephanopoulos, have the last word on this subject.
Well, I think it's very rare that you see the National Rifle Association, the ACLU, uniting against a series of measures. That's what's happening here. It's similar to what happened after Oklahoma City. So even though Attorney General Ashcroft has proposed a large package, it's likely to be pared down. You might see the ability to trace a person rather than simply each individual phone and computer software program or computer terminal, but you're not going to see an addition of wide-ranging surveillance capability for the Attorney General.
All right, speaking of short of breath, last week we all held our breath as we watched the markets take a huge plunge. And when we come back, we'll talk about what we see ahead for this country when it comes to our economy, right after this. Well, Betsy Stark said it earlier, the talk has gone from will there be a recession to how deep will the recession be? Koki, can the government do anything about this?
Well, that is an ongoing conversation right now in the halls of Congress. Last week, Alan Greenspan, the president's economic advisor, Larry Lindsey, and former Democratic Secretary of the Treasury, Robert Rubin, all went to Capitol Hill and had a big conversation with the congressional leaders. And Greenspan basically said, do no harm. You know, the economy is in such flux right now. Please, please, please don't send up an economic stimulus package right this second. Lindsey then talked about corporate income taxes. Rubin agreed that it should be a little bit slowed down, but if they were going to do anything, maybe temporarily stop the payroll tax or cut into it for certain income workers. This is the place where, as the Democrats and Republicans both say to me, the unspoken truce of bipartisanship could fall completely apart on this economic package. They don't want that to happen, and they're afraid of that happening.
You say do no harm, do no harm. But George Will, the president asked for $20 billion immediately, and the Congress said, here, take $40 billion. The president asked for an $8 billion package to bail out the airlines. Congress said, here, take $15 billion.
These are not big sums, Sam, in a $10 trillion economy. Let's put this in perspective. Last week, on the markets, we lost $1.4 trillion in paper wealth. But because of the bursting of the tech bubble, and we must be very glad it burst long before this, so we have a real cascade, that was a $5 trillion diminution of wealth. And you know what, Sam? We are now where we were in October 1998, when America was a very rich country.
George Stephanopoulos, everybody says if you've got good stocks and good companies, hold them for the long run. But last week, the small investors seemed to say, no.
Well, actually, it was. I think I heard actually that it was some of the large groups and large investors who were facing margin calls who were the first to dump out, and the small investor was trying to stay put. Just to pick up on what George Will was saying, I think that's right. We shouldn't overreact, and that's why Capitol Hill does have to be very careful. One of the really bad ideas that came up at the end of last week after the meeting with Greenspan and Rubin and Larry Lindsey that Koki talked about was for a permanent cut in the corporate income tax rate of up to 10%. That would cost $600 billion to $1 trillion. It's being pushed now hard by groups like the Business Roundtable, and that is a recipe for real disaster. It's guaranteed to offset any benefits with higher interest
what
rates.
you're saying is that everybody's bringing back up their own pet things. So the Democrats say get rid of the changes in the estate tax. The Republicans say what about capital gains? And this could be back to business as usual, which would look terrible for them.
But right now, the leaders at the very top are holding the line. And they are willing to go slow for a while, at least wait another week and wait for Alan Greenspan to come back with more data.
George Will, 15 seconds, have the last word.
Fact. This recession, if such it is, has been driven largely by negative investment decisions by business. The biggest way to cure that is to cut the corporate income tax.
Okay, that's the last word, conservative to the core. Thank you, George. Thank you, everyone. And Koki and I will be back right after this.
On World News Tonight this week, the United States and terrorism. The president's ultimatum to the Taliban. Get rid of Osama bin Laden. The Taliban in Afghanistan says no. This conflict involves the world, and so what happens next? We'll have a full report every evening on ABC's World News Tonight.
This afternoon in Yankee Stadium, Sam, there will be a memorial service for all of the families of those who were lost on September 11th, and our thoughts and prayers are with them.
Absolutely. We have 3 great webcasts for you to tune in today or log on to. Warren Rudman, who's warning that Americans would suffer here and lose casualties, was ignored. David Stempler on airlines, and Samuel Berger on how the Clinton administration tried to get Osama bin Laden but failed. So log on to sam.abcnews.com. And until next week, that's This Week.